Hiya and welcome to this week's episode of Inside Property Development, where I'm speaking with Tim Riley from RCKa Architects. We're talking about a whole load of really interesting stuff this week, including later living housing, the importance of collaboration, and how and why the focus in all development really needs to be on good design. Right, just a quick one. Whether you are a massively experienced and well-established property developer already, or maybe you're a new or aspiring one, either way, you will know that it is really not easy to find viable opportunities to come up with the best scheme, the best design that's going to maximise the land value and fully de-risk things for you, and then to go on to get the very best planning permissions as quickly as possible. However experienced you are, you will know that that is not an easy thing. I have put together a super detailed scorecard based on my 40 years experience in this industry, reverse engineering everything that I've learned, including lots and lots of mistakes over the years, and everything I've done to maintain, touch wood, 100% planning track record. I'm pretty sure there will be stuff that you don't know. Go and do that scorecard. Find out just how good or not your current process is, and I absolutely guarantee you will learn at least a little something, if not a ton. So it's bit.ly/MLA score, all in capitals. You can do the Millbank Land Academy scorecard. I absolutely guarantee you will find some interesting stuff, and it will help you get much better deals. Tim.
Hi, Paul.
Thanks for coming.
It's a pleasure.
So before we start, I usually ask people to just give us a sort of little intro about how they got started and building up to what you're doing now, really.
I went down a pretty traditional route, early architecture, worked for some great practices like Patel Taylor, Union North, doing lots of stuff for Urban Splash up in the northwest, and decided with a couple of mates we wanted to set up our own practice.
When was that?
That was in 2008. Brilliant time to set up
nice timing.
a practice. I think we've all got to a position where we were either been offered a position as a director or we were associates in a firm, and we felt we wanted to have a bit more agency ourselves. And we set up the practice without really having a strong idea of a mission behind the practice or anything. We just wanted to do our own thing. But very quickly we found ourselves in a position where we were really aligned on several ways of working. Although we came from very different backgrounds. So my background is kind of large-scale regeneration, housing-led. Russell Curtis, the other director, his was more commercial, and Dieter Kleiner, his was more community-based. But what brought them all together was an interest in people, and that was really fascinating how that really kind of galvanised us. And then we were really fortunate to be shortlisted for Young Architect of the Year. It actually happened twice, but the first time was particularly good because we didn't actually have much built work.
So just out of interest, let's just jump back, because obviously 2008 was a terrible time.
Yeah.
Did you sort of like start just before it all went tits up in terms of the economy?
No, it had gone tits up.
Did it?
Yeah. So we were doing sort of large projects, but then of course when you start as an architect, my network is up in the northwest as well, and so we started doing house extensions and that type of thing, but knew that it wasn't for us. We wanted to do much bigger things, and we were very fortunate. We won a few design competitions. We won one of the last Europan competitions for the UK for Stoke. Got very excited because a lot of people were behind that, and there was a lot of pressure to bring a Europan project forward. Sadly, that didn't go forward. I do think we struggle in the UK with these sorts of things.
Europan?
Yeah, Europan was
I don't know what that is. What's that?
It's a brilliant pan-European competition for architects and designers and master planners to take on. There's several briefs across all of Europe. You choose a city, you pick up your brief, and then you do a scheme for it. The best thing about Europan was that it generated some really fantastic practices on the back of it. So a lot of continental architects started off by winning a Europan project. In fact, in the UK, I think Witherford, Watson Mann had won the year before us. But in the UK, had a terrible reputation because we never delivered any of these projects. But on continental Europe, they did. And when you're a young architect, ambitious, you see it as this is my ticket to get to large-scale projects. But of course, we had that issue where the work that we were delivering was small scale, and the stuff we wanted to celebrate was the large-scale European type stuff. So there was a real disconnect between the two. But then one of the things that really happened to us that helped kind of galvanise us further was Young Architect of the Year shortlisting, which was really interesting because we didn't have a huge amount of built work, but we really had to hone our approach. And it was through that, forcing you to really kind of galvanise further the social purpose behind our work. And that stood us in good stead ever since, really, because a lot of people... I was at UK Reef last week, and social values, everything that we're talking about. It wasn't the case back in 2008, and so that's really stood us in good stead.
Just jump back out of interest. So the Stoke, was it, you said?
Yeah.
So you won the competition for that?
Yeah.
But it didn't happen?
No. Urban Splash, I think, who I'd worked with a lot when I was working up in the Northwest, had their own master plan. Well, I don't think anything happened on the side thing. Maybe some infrastructure projects that we weren't involved with.
So hang on, before I go on, because this is something I'm sort of trying to get to. So it didn't happen at all, or it didn't happen with you?
It didn't happen at all.
Yeah.
Really. Which is really sad, because a city like Stoke needed a big visionary piece of master planning, and it's got all the assets around Stoke are really valuable, but they're not as connected as they could be. All the community projects are great there. We got lots of agency, we're making huge impact. They're really exciting. But at the same time, I also want to deliver people's homes, because I can make a social impact in housing as well. And whilst we've done projects for small-scale developers, I think an interest of mine in particular is in later living or more specialised housing, where you're designing for a particular customer. So my background working with Urban Splash was really fascinating, because you'd work hand in glove with the sales and marketing team. Urban Splash at the time had a very small team, but you would work so hard to understand the customer, and every design decision you made had the customer in mind. And I feel as though some of that's been lost. There is a sense that we build it and then a customer will turn up, rather than build something around a customer profile. Some people do it still, but it's not as sophisticated as I think I used to do it with Urban Splash. And as a consequence, you'd have such customer loyalty, and people would camp overnight to be the first to buy an apartment, which is just unheard of. But yes, but it was all about understanding people, really, at the end of the day.
So obviously, Urban Splash, most of their stuff was in the north, and obviously in lower value areas, where it's actually hard financially to get things to stack up and be viable. How did they manage that?
I think quite quickly councils recognised the regeneration quality of what they did. They would Urban Splash arrived on an area, they completely transformed it, and they had a track record of doing that. So in terms of purchasing property, I don't know the full details of purchasing property. I don't imagine they were paying a lot for a lot of these properties, because these were like empty mills, empty towers that are seen as there are eyesores. There were antisocial behaviour issues with them, maintenance issues with them. So Urban Splash come along, and with a bit of vision, a lot of vision, completely transformed those buildings. What they shouldn't have had to pay a lot of money for these properties, because they transformed something with very little value.
I think there were a fair few JVs and deals with the council and stuff like that, but I thought you might know a bit more about the details. So
no, it wasn't my side of things, but I know that they didn't spend a huge amount of money on the land itself. But
yeah, very good. So tell us a bit more about the understanding the customer bit of it. Then, what did they do there?
They had a customer profile which they knew very well, and what we would do with the sales and marketing team, we would get local artists and people involved and try to really work up a brand for a building that would be of interest to those customers. The units themselves weren't. They were open. They were good quality units, but we would design bespoke kitchens, bespoke bathrooms, all around that customer profile. in mind. So everything would be completely bespoke, and it'd all be branded as part of. So that whole arrival sequence, it was all aligned to that customer, what that profile of customer, and including the landscape as well. That was really the extent of it, because a lot of what we were doing is, you design a good apartment, good outlook and lights and everything else. That's everyone wants that, but there are those smaller things that perhaps suit a certain sensibility.
You mentioned arrival sequences. Let's talk about that, because it's really important, and I'm sure might be some people listening to this that don't know what you're on about there.
We pride ourselves in securing a lot more value out of a site than many of our clients would expect. And a lot of that is to do with, we talk about placemaking, a lot of architects talk about placemaking, and being a bit more opportunity led. So there are obviously very, very many ways you can approach a site. You'll see projects where people are very led by constraint. They don't want to upset any neighbours. They end up building, the builder have a margin around the property that again, so will be full of grass or car parking, but there's no placemaking potential to that because essentially it's visual amenity or you're looking at a car. And then there's an object building in the middle, and it's brought away from the boundaries because it doesn't want to create any bad, neighbourly interactions. That's very inward looking, and you don't realise the full value of the site. Because obviously, in terms of your arrival sequence as well, you're walking through quiet, visual amenity type landscape or a car park. Some good examples of that, the project we did with Pegasus Life called 23A Leighton Road, where it was a site that in Harpenden, which is quite a valuable location, but the site had been empty for 14 years because no one could bring forward a viable scheme because they were following that same route every time. So they had permission for 14 dwellings. And so when we looked at it, we said, well, let's do this. Let's be more opportunity led and look at and placemaking led, and bring in some social space and that you walk through. So your arrival sequence is really highly managed. So the thresholds, you come into a social garden space which is well overlooked in terms of there's lots of passive surveillance, there's lots of activity dressing that. So already it's energized and you're thinking, I'd like to live here, before you make your way into an entrance lobby and then a light-filled atria, and then ultimately into your homes, and then from your home have the connection back to the gardens. In that instance, by being opportunity-led and placemaking-led, we secure permission for 38 dwellings, larger dwellings, and we tripled the sales area. You also result not only in a greater capacity, but you also end up with a much higher value development because of that arrival sequence. Essentially, you're having positive neighbourly interactions, which you wouldn't ordinarily do if you park your car. You go to a front door and
This is really interesting. So, who's the local authority?
So that one was St Albans District.
I thought so. Did it have consent for 14?
I don't want to play into the idea of like planning authorities pigeonholing planning authorities, but at that time, we looked at the site and we looked at the decision making of St Albans District Council, and we realised that the scheme, which had approval for 14 units, was secured through appeal, and there had actually been 14 different planning applications on that site. 14
applications on that site.
Yeah,
wow.
for various things. But
just before you go on, just out of interest, what was the trigger level on affordable housing? Was it 15?
10.
Oh, it's 10. Yeah. Wow. Okay.
We realised also that the district council, with major applications, the majority of them went to appeal.
Yeah.
And so we decided from the outset that we were going to design an appeal-ready scheme. And we engaged with the community behind us, with members, with various kind of stakeholder groups, garnered quite a lot of support. But when it came down to working with the council, there were lots of issues there, and they refused it at committee. It was recommended for a refusal.
Oh, it was recommended for refusal as well, yeah.
And we knew we had to go to an appeal, but as a consequence of that, that lack of engagement, I know that council have really lost out on, they didn't engage in Section 106 contributions. There's so many things that they didn't engage with. And so that, as a local person and a taxpayer, I'm thinking, well, I've not really looked out for me as a local taxpayer. So that was disappointing, but we knew we were already prepared for an appeal. So we went through a public inquiry and we secured permission and the inspector, they recognised there was some harm because of the amount of development on the site, but it was more than mitigated for by the quality of the design, and which is brilliant for an architect to have that. I should have that on a website, on a T-shirt or something. And now that building, sits very comfortably in the town. It's won awards. It's now got a restaurant that opens onto the cafe. And the whole project actually came about, as a local, I was trying to deliver a cafe into the park. And I had such a hard time working with the local councillors to try and arrange for a cafe. It's in the park's greenbelt, but having something that would support greenbelt use, people crying out for something, a cafe of some sort. And the councillors weren't interested at all. And then there was this opportunity. So I took it to Pegasus Life and brought the project forward. And now the cafe's buzzing. It's really successful.
Doing this whole podcast is meant to be a little bit educational and help everyone in the sector, planners, particularly developers and particularly SME developers, because I really want to try to, help and rebuild that sector, understand all of the issues that block housing of all sorts, so that hopefully everyone can understand each other a bit better and then collaborate rather than argue and fight. For example, St Albans, I don't expect you to comment, but I can say all of this stuff. Notoriously been one of the most anti-development local authorities in the whole country. I think they've got the oldest development plan, or at least they used to have. I think they're working on it now. And it's just not good for anyone, really. So, we all know we've got a massive housing problem. If you just mentioned, I think you said 14 years or 14 refusals, 14 applications. That's just crazy. You got what's obviously ended up as a developable, good site,
right in the centre of the town.
Right in the centre of town as well. It's just bonkers, isn't it? Yeah. So this is just indicative of how crazy things have been.
To add, though, the political persuasion of the council has changed. So it was conservative when we made our. That's another thing. I think I chair design review panel for Hertfordshire, and there's no point when you use a design review panel to hide or to never go as the advice for developers. I'd recommend you go in with a very open mind into a design review panel, because it can be a really useful tool. Show where the project's not working, show options you've tested and everything else. Design review panels are experienced architects and landscape architects, planners, designers, and they know the process and they'll understand. And they're not after a presentation, they're after workings. And often we'll go into a design review and say, that this is the policy, this is why we can't meet it because of all these good reasons. And more often than not, that design review panel will get behind you, but in doing so, they enlighten the planning officer, which is really useful.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think they're a fantastic thing, because you're talking to people that actually do get it. Whereas, perhaps generally, local councillors and less experienced planners just think you're bullshitting them all the time.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So let's finish off. So I know later living is one of your sort of specialisms.
Yeah.
So let's perhaps delve into that a little bit.
Okay. First, it's an absolutely brilliant sector to work in. It needs a lot more support than it has at the moment. For me and from the team and in the office, it's really rewarding, particularly when you go and visit your developments, and once people have moved in and you see a new lease of life, and you hear from their children who have worried about their parent being lonely in their family home, rattling around the family home. You witness the social networks that they build and how happy they are. But I think they're, and a bit like this, there was something about disconnect. There's a a huge disconnect, I think, in later living, in that when you go to a later living development in operation, it's full of very happy people and they're living their best life. But when you go and meet someone who's lonely in their family home and they're thinking, and you talk about moving to a later living development, there's a lot of fear. Of course, naturally there's fear, and obviously you're living in a family home, you built your memories, and caution, and it must be quite daunting. And I think that it would help if there were if that bridge could be improved somehow with a better communication, what have you. But certainly as a sector, it's brilliant because you work with your clients are operators, so they have a long-term interest in the quality of the scheme, which is really nice. The decision making is more skewed to longevity. There is a genuine interest in well-being, and actually what we're doing with a lot of the retirement villages we're doing at the moment, we've got 3 at the moment we're working on with Retirement Villages Group. They're all this peri-urban kind of edge of settlement option, which are really relevant, I think, particularly when we talk about grey belt. Because what they do is that they deliver social infrastructure. So they tend to be that you may have open fields on one side of the site and suburban housing on the other. Now that suburban housing will be about 30 dwellings per hectare max. It'll be heavily car reliant. They won't be able to support any social infrastructure locally or within walking distance because there's just not the capacity, there's not the density there. What a retirement village, like the ones we're doing for Retirement Villages Group or IRCs as they're also known, what they do is you can build more intensively because there's a recognition that interdependence and communal way of living is very positive. So we might achieve between 60 and 90 dwellings per hectare, but we deliver loads of social infrastructure. So there's a shop, a restaurant, cafe, treatment rooms, studio, and landscape gardens and things. And what's happening with a lot of these operators, they recognise the value in making those facilities available to the wider community. And so all of a sudden you're delivering all this social infrastructure that wouldn't have otherwise been delivered. You're also delivering it a third of the cost land-wise of delivering homes really efficiently. And the other thing I think that's happening is the people that move into these, they're local people in the main. And so because they want to keep their social networks together. And so they move in, which is why it's important that it's open to the wider community. And our retirement villages that we're designing, there's play equipment in there for children because they have to be designed to be multi-generational. Whilst the residents themselves are retired, the landscape, the communal facilities, we put areas for play in because people have grandchildren. So it is a multi-generational type development, and they're really successful. And in fact, we use a community scorecard, which is really interesting because they look at the well-being benefits beyond the site boundary. So you judge yourself against those. So you make decisions around active lifestyles and that type of thing. But they're a really useful tool. And actually, when the government talks about 1.5 million homes delivered in this term, when you look at the demographic shifts, so that whilst the population is increasing, the biggest change is in our demography. And so when you look at the number of new dwellings we need 900,000 more homes for people aged over 65. Now that doesn't mean to say they're care homes, IRCs or later living or just simply living in your home, but that's still 900,000 homes for people aged over 65. In terms of family housing, we need 400,000 fewer family homes because we deliver a lot of homes. This is just for the demographic shift. And so I think one of the things that we should be asking ourselves is within that 1.5 million, how do we deliver a greater diversity of homes that suit our needs? And I think that I've not seen much in the way of discussion around that. And I do believe that given the benefits of IRCs, I mean, they won't be the answer for 900,000 homes. I think the Older People's Housing Task Force suggested 30 to 50,000 per year. And historically we've delivered 7,000, I think. And I think last year a lot less than that. If that's where the need is, then we need more investment, more support. But I think what's happening without that nuance or that consideration of that diversity of offer, we're falling into the trap of just delivering a really monocultural house builder solution that we don't actually need that solution. I mean, it's very land hungry. It encourages the use of the car. So it's not serving our communities. And I think what we need to be doing is having a conversation around, house builders should be diversifying their offer. I'm not saying it's house builders or IRCs. I think we all need to work together to work on what we should be doing. We should be looking at, in the grey belt, there should be more apartments. And how do we integrate apartments into that rural setting? Which is a big part of what we do, because we need to increase the density. So if we can get to, say, 60 dwellings per hectare, then we can, at 60 dwellings per hectare, we can deliver sustainable, walkable neighbourhoods. So we talk about 15-minute cities. So at 60 dwellings per hectare, your doctor's surgery will be within 800 metres. And in theoretically, that's what we can achieve. But the more we deliver the less than 30 dwellings per hectare, the more cars we need, the more car infrastructure we need, the less biodiversity we can offer, the more land we take, and the more pressure we put on our existing infrastructure without providing anything else. Diversity of offer is not being discussed at all. I'm not seeing it discussed at all. We have these different camps. So Older People's Housing Task Force talks about what they need to do. Obviously that was their remit, and house builders will talk about what they need to do. But actually we need to be working together to work out, well, actually between us, what could a house builder, if they're not interested in operating a retirement village, what could a house builder do to provide a product to suit people over 65, for example, that better serves their needs? But it's such a massive subject, but we're not having that debate. We're all in our silos still, and it'd be nice to see some of that debate come forward, because the danger is that we're going to be building a lot of homes that won't suit the people that need to live in them.
Need them, yeah. Very good. Well, you have helped fuel that debate by talking about it here. Everyone listening, don't forget to like and share. And so the more people see this stuff, the more people hear this stuff, the more people can start hopefully working together to get more good quality housing of all sorts created.
Yeah, we need to work together.
We do.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, that's cool.
Thanks for tuning in to Inside Property Development. Please remember to like and subscribe. Do join us every week, where we'll be speaking to house builders, developers, experts, planners, and everyone involved in trying to get more much needed housing created the right way. We'll learn together how we can collaborate rather than fight, and by working together we can all help create better places, spaces and homes, and a much more beautiful world.